Hey guys, this is Arn from the Gimble and Arn show. We're a really exciting guest this week. You might have seen him yesterday on Kings of Tin. He is Joshua Gray, also known as Clutch. Josh, would you care to give us an introduction of yourself?
Sure. My name is Clutch. In the esports world, the gaming world, I've hosted a lot of Major League Gaming events. Really excited to be hosting for NASL. The finals coming up this weekend. I've been involved in esports at a professional level for a number of years now, and I love video games and I love performing, and so for me to combine the two together is really a dream come true.
Wonderful. I'm trying to think of, I think the best place to begin, just to give everyone sort of an overview, I think we'll talk to Clutch for the first half about sort of your gaming, and the second half more about acting, because I really want to learn more about where that acting background came from, because it seems to play such a strong part in the marvelous hosting you do. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and put them in chat. We'll get to them at the end of the first half. But I was reading watching an ESFI interview. What is it like? I watched it a couple days ago, but it was an interview back like 8 months ago now, and you were talking about how video games have always been a part of your life. And you mentioned Nintendo, so I was actually kind of wondering what first got you hooked on gaming, and what was the first game that you remember playing and really enjoying, and why?
When I was 5 years old, my parents got me a Nintendo Entertainment System, and I just fell in love with it automatically, and I had enjoyed playing Super Mario Brothers a lot. And also, friends of mine would have Duck Hunt and going over there and playing that game. And there's a lot of games that I had for we call it the regular Nintendo after the Super Nintendo came out. And I remember one game called Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, based on the film. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out the last puzzle to solve. And you had to walk on these different tiles, but you had to walk in a certain way that they wouldn't crumble and fall and you would die. And the game was a lot of fun. The soundtrack was great. But literally 8 years later, when I had the proper cognitive process to understand the puzzle, I was able to understand that I had to spell Jehovah, but with an I. Like Sean Connery says in the movies, like Jehovah spelled with an I. And I was able to figure it out, and I finally beat it. And so years later, this puzzle that had been plaguing me for years, whenever I tried to go back and play it, I was able to successfully overcome it. So in that one story, it's a bit of a glimpse of what video games have meant to me, but I was a huge lover of Nintendo back in the day, and that evolved more into the Final Fantasy series and PlayStation 2, and then when the Xbox 360 came out, kind of worked that way into consoles. But PC gaming, I think, is my #1 type of gaming because of the LAN environment that I would go to outside the Seattle area where I am originally from, and being able to play Brood War with other people and compete in small Brood War tournaments and play Counter-Strike with other people. And even though we would be either across from each other or there'd be in a separate room, we could like get up and talk about the game and socialize about it. And it didn't matter really how old you were. I was about 12, 13-year-old kid, and I'm playing against these 20, 30-year-olds, and we're all enjoying the game and having a good time. And so to me, I found a lot more social interaction that way compared to just consoles with a couple friends coming over and only having like 2 controllers or 4 controllers. But GoldenEye, I think, was the last game I ever played with my parents. Like, my parents would actually try and play with me, and they would get okay, but then they quit after that. And they'd always say nobody could play Odd Job because that wasn't any fair. I grew up with it. It's a part of my life, and it's a part of my personal culture and my family's culture as well.
Sort of going off that, this might seem like an odd question, but I think a lot of people nowadays seem to have had some experience with gaming. They'll play games for a bit as a kid, but they tend to. Well, there seems to be this expectation that I feel, at least on the East Coast here, that you grow out of gaming. That you do gaming as a kid and it's fun as a hobby, and maybe you do a little as you grow up, but then you get into the quote-unquote real world, and gaming is a kid thing. So why is it that you think for you didn't grow up, that gaming is still so important to you?
You could have that same argument with instruments. You can have that same argument with sports. People grow out of those sort of things that were heavily influenced from their parents of, hey, you should learn how to play the violin or learn to play the piano, or you should play soccer. And a decision is made down the line. A lot of it could be peer pressure. You do a lot of the things your friends do, and if you make a lot of friends in school that don't play soccer or are not in band, you're going to have kind of similar interests or lean towards what they're doing. And so people can technically grow out of it that way. But to me, gaming has always been very social and very competitive, and having that competitive drive and having fun with your friends has always been something that we as humans love to do. I mean, we love to be winners, and we love to have social interactions. So I never, quote-unquote, grew out of it because I always found a way that it kept me energized and stimulated with my friends in a social way, and also that I felt I could progress and get better at. And, you know, some games, when you play online, you can get really frustrated, and when you start to sense that you're getting better and better and better, you get more inspired to play more, and you acclimate it into your schedule. So that's the competitive side. But the story side, I think, is what has kept me the most, because when you play games that are truly epics like Final Fantasy or other sort of single-player games, they take you on this journey, and it's a journey that's unique and interactive that you can't find in movies and you can't find in books. And that sort of storytelling was new at that time, and it's gone through some different iterations and some changes with graphics and voiceovers and whatnot. But those journeys were so influential to me as a kid that I knew this is something I wanted to keep in my life, because I would learn from the characters. I'd try to emulate the characters. I would think about like the love story between Squall and Renoa and how poetically beautiful it was. At the very end of Final Fantasy VIII, they finally kiss, so they're about to kiss. And that may sound kind of like hokey for an 8-year-old, but you think, man, I'd love to find a girl like Renoa one day. And a lot of people, like, you know, in the 70s and 80s, they think the same thing about girls in movies. Like, I'd love to find a girl like that in this movie that I watched. And so attaching myself to those kind of characters or traits, it really impacted me on a deep level. And I think kind of helped with acting as well, because these are stories being told by storytellers that are pioneers, really, in a new media format that the world wasn't totally understanding yet, and I think has a better understanding now.
I gotta ask you, because you brought up Final Fantasy VIII, are you familiar with the Squall is dead theory? And if you are, what are your thoughts on it?
I'm not familiar with the theory, maybe because I just, whenever somebody says that, I'm like, nope, 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 nope. Is this more tying into like Final Fantasy X, where Titus, or people pronounce him Titus, is like a ghost or dead the whole time?
Yeah,
there's the story. Okay.
There's I don't remember where I read it, but someone linked it, and I you know, because I love Final Fantasy VIII. It's by far my favorite Final Fantasy game. So I think I was just going through memory lane one day and found it, and it's this. The example I found is this huge write-up of how the assertion is, I think, at the end of disc 1, when Squall gets stabbed,
he gets impaled. Yeah.
Gets impaled with the icicle. That everything after that is a dream sequence for him. That he's dead, and that they cite the author cites sudden changes in the way the world seems to work, and how he suddenly goes from being sort of a side character, so like just a grunt in the army, to being the pinnacle of the story, and how previously to, this is way too long, but previously to in the first part of disc 1, Renoa is she's with someone else, and then afterwards she suddenly switches her attention. So just like things like that.
It could just be girls are fickle at that age, man. That's an interesting concept, and it also kind of reminds me of the huge internet blow-up, if you will, of the end of Mass Effect 3, which I think was horribly handled by EA. You had such an amazing build-up that you could have really rewarded all of your fans of playing this game for the last 5+ years, and it just fizzled out. But then when people were trying to piece together and think, wait a second, Commander Shepard could have been indoctrinated by the Reapers, and then it starts to give all these examples and these sound cues and taking more lore information from the book, and I started to believe, like, whoa, he totally could be indoctrinated, and EA may have done like this huge bait and switch that at first was going to make them into total just jerks of what they did with the story, and then these huge saviors of, gotcha guys, he was indoctrinated, but they didn't do that at all.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you asked this kind of questions, man, because as much as I love esports and competitive gaming, in my heart as well, there have been some really beautiful stories that are told and that have inspired a lot of discussions. And when I got to interview Robert Clotworthy, him and I had a discussion afterwards, and we talked about how novels were a part of our culture. That's why we're assigned different novels in school to read, because we learn from these different figures and different scenarios and how we can learn from their mistakes, learn from their journeys, and that is translating into video games now. You can learn really life lessons from these different characters and really go on a journey that maybe you don't like learn a deep moral lesson, but your vocabulary is expanded, your understanding of relationships is expanded just from a story that was told.
Well, okay, so that's our follow-up question. Is there an example you can give me of something, of a story in a video game that is memorable or had a profound impact on the way you think?
Final Fantasy was a really, really big series to me as a kid. More recently, Mass Effect, with the different kind of choices that you can make, I found pretty profound. And of recent memory, I will say the moment, and I may be spoiling it for some people, but I have to describe it in detail.
Yeah.
When the assassin in Mass Effect 3 is praying, or he is dying, and his son is there, and the assassin says, wants a prayer said, and the prayer is said, and it was beautiful, it was well written, and then a character passes away, and the son reveals to Commander Shepard that prayer wasn't for him, he was already at peace, the prayer was for Commander Shepard. And I went, wow, man, that last moment that character had in his life, the last thing he did was to pray for his friend, because he knew of what he was about to go through. And I found that really, really, really cool, really deep. So that's, your last moments in life really define who you are. And he was already at peace of where he was, and his last moments he did something selfless to even something as simple as saying a prayer for somebody else.
Well, can I ask you sort of as a way of closing the talk about the video game narrative, do you foresee, you talked about books being used as a source of learning and teaching, especially in classrooms right now. Do you see video games gaining that sort of position?
I feel it can. Films have taken a long time to enter the classrooms. When I grew up, we watched a film as a reward, or our teacher was sick, right? And I have learned a lot from films as well, and a lot of people have within our culture, especially with films being more on both sides of the spectrums, not just more like later teenagers, adults, but also for kids, and not made in a corny way, but in a legitimate, this is for all ages, a life lesson is learned kind of movies, like the Renaissance days of Disney. And since film has taken a while to really enter the classrooms, video games, I think, will be a little bit more of a struggle, because the stigma of the world right now is less than it was 10 years ago, but they feel that video games is for kids. But I love having discussions with people that had kind of the same background or same childhood I did when it comes to video games, talking about the stories of different characters and their journeys and going through, and the huge surprises. I mean, Knights of the Old Republic is one of the biggest surprises I ever felt, one of the biggest twists in a video game, and having that discussion with people is great. So I don't think video games could replace, book learning, but I feel that on an individual basis or in an individual way, if I was a teacher in a school, okay, your assignment is to play through the Mass Effect series this summer, and then come back and we'll talk about screenwriting and delivering and making sure you know the end from the beginning when you tell a story, and how that can be implemented into teaching people what to do in telling a story and what not to do.
Interesting. Looking through questions. Guys, keep putting questions in chat. We'll get to them at the end of the... I'll ask that question in a second, Gimble. Put questions in chat, and we'll get to them at the end of the half an hour. Yeah, Josh, Gimble wants to know if you played Oregon Trail at school.
I did, and I tried to play it at home, but it was funny that the software would not allow a newer version of QuickTime to be installed on the computer. I had to use like an older version of QuickTime for the software to work, and at that time I was like, forget it, man. If they're not going to update for the game. And this is back like before the internet really was a thing. I just found that really funny that a newer version of QuickTime was out, and then if you downloaded that, Oregon Trail would not work. And I think it was like Oregon Trail 6 or something, where they had live actors and they would film them. And they're like, oh, you got to buy a brush to get this and whatnot.
Oh, yep. Oh man, bringing back memories. Oh, I could talk about this more, but I won't get to the rest of this. Like, I mean, it's been a while since I've talked about. This show is so focused on competitive gaming that we don't often talk about. Yeah, the single player games, they're the more narrative focused. But anyway, that's for another time. Most people know you best is Clutch, and so I was really hoping you could give us some insight into how the personality of Clutch, the handle of Clutch, was born, and how it evolved into where you are now, with about to go to the NASL finals.
Well, Clutch was my call sign when I was in the United States Air Force, and I found that to be a really cool call sign, so I kept it after I left the Air Force. And I had it be my gamer tag subsequently after that for a while. And when I had spoken to some people in esports and I was looking to see if I could fill in any positions with Major League Gaming as a private contractor back in 2010, we just went by our call signs because it was easier. That's how we communicated on the internet, be it Team Liquid or Skype or however we did it. I just was known by Clutch on the internet. And I've used that to identify myself, and I've really enjoyed that name, and I answer to it all the time. I mean, my roommates are like, yeah, he's got a show, and he's Clutch and whatnot, and it feels that it's a part of me. And using that to identify myself in the competitive game world is a lot of fun, too, because when I play ladder on StarCraft 2, like, this isn't the real Clutches. I'm like, yeah, it is. And they'll start freaking out and whatnot, and it's just fun to kind of surprise them. And then they asked to prove it, and so I'd prove it on Twitter. But somebody brought up a little while ago, like, do you think that it's professional to have those type of names? So yes, I do think it's professional to have those type of names because it's part of who we are and what the gaming community is all about. Now, if on my resume, when I send out to different companies, both in and outside of esports, my name on there is Joshua Gray, and then when I detail what I've done in esports, I'm known as Clutch. Yeah, I feel that it's very appropriate to have those kind of nicknames because the players have them as well. And honestly, the players are really centric to all of this. Without the players, there would be no esports. And how we kind of treat and identify the players, it'll feel natural to identify the casters and talent as well.
Do you feel like is Clutch you, or is it a specific part of your personality that you sort of amplify? I mean, if you're sort of looking at yourself, what is Clutch, or who is Clutch? Would be a question. Clutch
is the video game performance mode of Joshua Gray, be it playing the actual game or being in front of a camera and talking about games or players or introducing players. It's a sense of representing something more than just myself, representing a community, representing my personal background and love for video games and competition, and how to present that in a way that's entertaining. So that's why I say, like, the Clutch version of Joshua Gray is.
So then the Joshua Gray version of Clutch is just a little more toned down and
not like a big presenter voice. It's more of a listener and taking in, and half of acting is listening, really, and being able to respond to others by understanding where they're coming from. And when I'm Clutch on stage, I'm controlling that stage. Like, that stage is mine. Those players are there. I know what I'm doing. I know what needs to be done. And I need to make sure I say the team names right and go from there. Team Polt, my favorite team. And honestly, from that, too, when that happened, I felt so odd because I knew the players. I knew the teams. Like, I triple check all the time before I go on stage. But just something in my mind that didn't flip right, or some node didn't fire off and said the wrong thing, and you really have to laugh it off, but at the same time I have to learn from it. So me as Joshua Gray, I look at the VODs and I think, okay, how can I improve? What went wrong here? What can go better? And as the entire package of myself as a personality, I have to make sure that I do the best I can wherever I go. And So as the Joshua Gray version of Clutch is I watch Clutch on the screen and I take notes and I think, okay, Clutch, this is how you can do better.
Well, so can you sort of give us a little more insight into what exactly that means when you're trying to, so Joshua Gray is looking at Clutch and analyzing the performance.
Mm-hmm.
What is a good performance to you? Like when you're looking at yourself, are you looking at the emotions? Are you looking at the hand gestures? I mean, what stands out as being important?
Body posture first off, which is important. Am I grounded? Am I looking at the camera? Am I looking at the crowd at the right times? Am I engaging with the crowd and the camera? Because the tricky thing about hosting is it's both stage acting and camera acting, or stage performing and camera performing. I have to have enough energy going out to the entire audience that's watching, plus I have to focus energy into the camera and not be too over the top, because the camera people are like, whoa, what's going on? Because they don't have the same sense of that whole audio sound of the crowd and that visual stimulation of that entire crowd being there. So making sure my energy is balanced between the two, and positioning myself, making sure I know which area the player's going to come to, thinking of, as a director as well, what does a camera shot look like, not having the repeated background, having more of an angle. So I look at those notes and I think what I can do and what I can do to communicate to the producer, the director, to how to make the shot look better. Obviously I'm not trying to boss them, but we have to work as a team. And if somebody has a good idea, they have to bring it up, because we're all working at like 110 miles an hour in a live setting. So yeah, and just other things, voice inflection, things that I've learned from acting training, and I think a lot of people have seen that I've improved from the first time I started hosting to the last time in Anaheim.
Most definitely. Although it's sort of I don't know. For me, it's in a way remarkable that you improved, because you started out so strong. I mean, there were certainly things that there are flaws in the very first performance, but even then, like I think a lot of us were struck by how natural it all seemed to you, and it felt to us to sort of have you at that stage as a presenter, even that first time, and then obviously Anaheim was that much more polished. But
yeah.
I had a question to complete. Oh, that was my question. I was going to ask. You're talking about the ways in which you judge yourself and your performance.
Mm-hmm.
Benchmark wise, do you just go off of feel, or do you have specific references of people you look at, or training you pull, specific benchmarks and training you pull from to say this is good or this wasn't good?
Well, growing up, watching different sporting events and seeing Michael Buffer or Bruce Buffer and how they introduce players, which is something we've really needed at some of these esports events to really hype the finals, especially, and how to introduce that. And looking at what they do, how they prepare themselves, how they have a card just in case, and how I made sure to have a card just in case, because before that I was just going off straight for memorization or off memory, and they would tell me like 2 minutes before, 30 seconds before who's going to be on stage, and so that was a little bit hectic. But to have a pen and those cards to be on the fly live and know who's doing what, and to write up questions real quick, just to have them just in case, like my brain shuts off for some weird reason. It's kind of an anchor. And incorporating what I had learned from professionals from growing up and studying them a little bit more, and then just studying myself and thinking, am I being original, or am I borrowing too much? Is it me? Is it authentic? And saying that yes, it's authentically me up there every time, and how to just improve upon that, and to really solidify my style and what I'd like to do and what I wanted to do. And I felt that I would improve at every event, but MLG Anaheim really was the cusp of all the hard work that I've been doing for the last 2 years, be it behind the camera or in front of the camera when it came to esports, and all the work I've been doing since I was 5 years old as an actor, to not have to portray a character different from myself, but to portray a version of myself that is in performance mode. And being an actor, I mean, that's what you have to do. There might be certain traits or differences in character that you portray in a character, but part of you has to be there, otherwise a character isn't true. So it's all me, it's all Clutch up there on the stage, and it's really my passion, really my love for competitive gaming, and it's worth it every time to be up there, especially with the crowd's reaction live and then afterwards.
All right, well then I gotta ask, this may be difficult, but can you help us understand what it's like to be on that stage. What it's when you're in that moment. What's the emotions? What's the feeling? What's it like?
Well, people ask me before I go on stage, "Are you nervous?" And I say, "Yes, yes, I'm nervous." But there's a quote that I heard that I use every time, or almost every time somebody asks me that question, and it's, if you're not nervous about your passion, you're not passionate enough about it. And I use that to fuel myself. I've been nervous a lot of times being on stage as an actor in front of the camera, and that allows you to be completely in the moment and completely aware. And yes, it can be a little bit debilitating at times, and you could trip up a couple times, but if people are patient around you and they believe in you, and if you believe in yourself, you'll be able to push through that and then really hit that professional level. It's like you can't do it the first time perfectly. If you can, congratulations, but you're going to stumble and fall afterwards because you still need to grow. And it's funny in the acting world that if you nail an audition, sometimes a director won't hire you because you nailed that audition and you're not going to grow from it. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. If somebody's the best one to audition for it, you'd obviously want to hire them. Like, no, you would rather have somebody that's good but that can still grow, because they'll take notes from the director. They'll work on the character. They'll grow into something, and seeing that process, that artistic process, creates something amazing on stage. But if you have somebody that's great all the time, but they won't grow anywhere, they'll become stale, and their performance can become stale. So with that being said, when I walk on the stage and see everyone ready to see the next player, ready to see the next match, I think I want to present them in the best way possible, their next player, and to hype this next match, because we all love this game, we love these players, we love esports, and I want it to be the best that it can be, production-wise, show-wise, and I'll leave the matches up to the players. And that's what I get nervous about, because I want it to be the best. But when you get on that stage and you introduce Stefano, or you introduce MMA, or you introduce DRG, and the crowd goes nuts, it's an amazing, amazing feeling. And to be able to ask them questions, to make sure the questions are relevant and are not, are questions that I would want to answer if I was a player. I try to have those questions there that are not too intrusive or not too thought-provoking, so they can still focus on the match. But at the same time, to give them a chance to be on camera, that the team loves because they get to see the jerseys, the sponsors love because the sponsors get camera time, and it also allows the player to have this cathartic relay of their emotions. Like, I feel super nervous, but I'm confident in my Terran versus Zerg play style. And the crowd goes nuts, and that helps them just take a breath, enjoy the energy from the crowd, and then get ready for the match. And so being there and controlling all that, making sure it's appropriate for the players, can be a little bit daunting, but the more I do it, the more I'm accustomed to doing it, and the better it gets. So it's a great feeling.
It's really interesting to me. Sorry to interrupt there. I apologize for that. I'm just struck by this point that you're homing in, or maybe not a point, but an aspect. You're talking about asking questions, and you explicitly say the focus, or you're thinking from the player's perspective. I find that striking, that you're not thinking from, say, the audience's perspective and what they want to hear the players say or what they want to know. That the players are your priority, making so that you're asking questions that they would want to answer, it's not going to disrupt them. It's really striking to me.
The funny thing about that too is, though, they're questions that the audience wants to hear as well, and you have to kind of tie them together. And some people on Reddit and other forums, like, you keep asking, how do you feel, how do you feel? It's like, that's the best way to present that question. I'm leaving it open-ended enough the player can say pretty much anything he wants to answer that question, and the audience will react to it. And asking 2 to 3, maybe even 4 questions, I feel is appropriate, and I don't want to deflate the hype for the match. It's really about the match and the player, and it has to be engaging with the audience as well. I'm not going to ask, so how's your girlfriend doing? Because that has nothing to do with the match. The audience is going to be like, why did he ask that question? Except 4 people go, yeah, girls, yeah, and they'll clap,
Right.
And it's an art. It really is. Part of hosting, it's not just getting a microphone and looking nice and asking a player, like, so tell me how you feel and stuff. And I have to say, so how do you feel about this match coming in, knowing that you played Stefano earlier in the tournament? Or how do you feel about your Terran versus Zerg playstyle after defeating 2 prominent Zerg players? You know, it has to be specific enough to the player, to the scenario, but broad enough that everybody can appreciate the answer.
Well, can I ask you, since we've been talking about hosting, I thought decent time to ask you about shifting gears, because I know you've got that coming up tonight. So for anyone who's not familiar, maybe give us a quick recap of the function of the show, the purpose of the show, and then what we can look forward to tonight and where people can tune in to watch.
Sure. Shifting Gears, hosted by Clutch, see what I did there, is a show that I've been doing for about a year now, and it's a video game variety talk show. We talk about all sorts of games, including StarCraft 2 and esports. Sometimes I'll play live to show off a different game. Recently I played Terra, which is an MMO that was released a couple months ago, just to show off what it was all about and to give my take on it and kind of review it in the process of playing it and taking questions from the chat. And then I'll have guests on there or pro players on there to talk about the scene, to talk about their game, to talk about upcoming tournaments they're going to be in. And this upcoming episode, I'm going to have Hi-Res Bart from Hi-Res Studios, and he's going to talk about tribes, he's going to talk about Smite, he's going to talk about the advantages of being an independent developer and publisher compared to working with a large publisher, and we're going to talk about the NASL Finals, because he's going to be there, Tribes is going to be there, there's going to be a $10,000 prize pool tournament that I believe starts at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday of the NASL Finals weekend. So it's going to be a great episode, and it's a growing show, and I've had a variety of people that have been guests on it, and I'm going to continue to do it until, I don't know, probably I die or my second Oscar or something. But I really enjoy doing it, and I appreciate all the support that people have been giving it, and it's every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/clutch08.
Can I ask you about the 08? Because the 08 seems to keep popping up everywhere.
Yeah, well, Clutch was taken on Twitter, and Clutch 8 was taken on Twitter, so I chose Clutch 08. And just to kind of uniform it, I've just been using that ever since. I'm still Clutch 8 on Team Liquid, which I had before Twitch, obviously. But 8's my favorite number, and that's why I chose it.
Fair enough. Now the mystery has been solved, and I can sleep easy. Well, so guys, I mean, definitely tune in tonight. You know, I'm sure we will. Well, Gimble may not, because he's in Europe, so he'll probably be asleep, but I will be.
It's okay. There will be VODs. There will be VODs.
I'm sure Gimble will catch the VOD, and anyone else in Europe will catch the VOD. But to end the end of this first half before we go into user questions, you've done a lot of interviews with people, with players, with figures, you know, from being on stage and with hosting, but also with shifting gears and elsewhere. And you've also been interviewed a bunch. And I'm just curious if there's a question you've ever wanted to be asked, something you've ever wanted to talk about or say about yourself, but no one's asked you that question yet.
I would say the question would be, why is hosting so important? And it's kind of funny for how long some events haven't had a proper host, so they haven't figured out really how to use a hosting position. They've just been using casters. And my personal feelings is casters need to focus on casting. They shouldn't be impromptu hosts that have to come up with questions on the fly or have to leave their seat, or they have to have a little powwow with the director and producer to decide who's going to, you know, introduce the next player. You should have a dedicated person to do that. That's what a host does. People have been hosting different events inside and outside sports for years, and it fits very well. I mean, that's part of production, is you have a host. And using a host to control the flexibility of the stage. The stage is the most flexible space in the room. And a host should be flexible enough to have questions on the fly, to have people that they want to interview on the fly, to be able to fill time, and to be able to communicate with the producer and the director to fill any time necessary in an entertaining way, not an awkward way. And I am so grateful for the opportunities that I've had to grow in the hosting position and to work with producers and directors to understand what I need as a host from them and what they need from me, and how we can communicate and work together to create really great moments. And we have seen that with leagues that I've worked with Major League Gaming over the next couple of years. And different leagues have different styles, they have different directions, and different decisions that they make. But I hope that I bring to the scene a certain level of professionalism and understanding of why a host is important. And I respect the other hosts out there. I think a lot of them do a great job, and I look forward to more events that can properly use hosts. Look at Red Eye from the WCS UK National.
Yeah.
So that was a great way to use a host, and they picked somebody that had a lot of great charisma, that was relaxed and didn't make anything awkward. He was personable with the players, but still engaged the audience enough to keep them entertained. And so that is an example of using a great host, and I'm glad that esports is using that more and more to increase the production value. And I feel that there's some other things that esports needs. I feel that players need proper media training, to have better posture in front of the camera, to have better staging sense in front of the camera. And that comes naturally to some people because they're emulating people they've seen on camera, but to others it doesn't. And I feel that some leagues or some teams could really utilize hiring some sort of a media training or media production company to teach the players a little bit better how to carry themselves and to carry their product really in front of a camera and on stage. So
and you would argue for media training because it presents sponsors better, or presents a team in a better light, or like what does it do? What does
you could say sponsors, yes, could be happier, or teams could be happier, but seriously, the player, when they interact with the crowd, when they have wit to them or a little snap to them, they're more memorable outside of their gameplay. And within their gameplay, it's almost like, not secondary, but it's almost like a secondary kind of, or separate kind of faction to the player themselves. We have seen some players that are phenomenal in front of the camera that have backgrounds as far as performing, and maybe their game isn't really top right now, but they're still memorable. They're still active in the scene because they know how to handle themselves. And I feel that some players are either too shy or don't know exactly what to do. Some of them just don't care. But I feel that as a whole, individual players can get more name recognition, can get higher stream numbers, can get their name more out there outside of their gameplay by being a little bit more media savvy. Not to take anything away from their personalities. I mean, sometimes the nerdy, shy thing works definitely in esports, but people are a little bit more memorable when they engage a crowd.
So can I ask you, because it's really interesting that you bring this up, because we've talked with some players in the past and some managers as well, who have, again, I keep referencing Vile Chance on the show because we talked to him months ago, but I think he was one of the first to sort of bring up this idea that he sees the Western scene as opposed to the Korean scene is be much more media dependent. That for a player to be successful, they really need to be, with the oversaturation, they need to be much more media savvy. So do you think that you can have players who only play the game well and are well known and successful, or do you think players really need to be having this media component to be successful and to be able to make a career, not just to sort of boost themselves?
Yeah, well, some teams, some players have managers or PR reps, and it could be the same person wearing different hats for the team, but they help push the image of that player into the media sphere. And a lot of players, because of their play, have a lot of people that follow them, and that's a great thing. But think of how much more impact they could have if they were media savvy. And when I say that, I don't mean that they have to be like game show host media savvy, just that they can approach a camera, can approach interviews better, or can be a little bit more stately in their interviews and make them a little more likable or personable, instead of, that guy's really good at the game, but I have no idea what he's like outside of the game, and I'd like to find out more, but there's nothing available. That's a really good point you bring up with the Western scene, and I don't know why the Western scene is like big more on being more media savvy, because look at the Kespa players at Anaheim. Maybe it's just players that are not really familiar yet with media attention in Korea, but are amazing at the game, and so the media brings attention to them automatically because of the game at the GSL or even going to foreign tournaments. But the Kespa players, they come out, they talk in English, one does a backflip. Like it seems they have been trained on how to properly present themselves with media, and Kespa and at the MSL and the OSL back in the days, those were media channels. Like that was like the NBC of us, or the ABC or the Fox, and so they really had to be, I guess, trained or not controlled, but kind of pushed into the media realm, because they represented a product that was huge in the media, and having a huge media sponsor is very important.
Well, I think on that note we're gonna go to some user questions and take a quick break. But we got a bunch of questions, or at least a good deal. First one is, Stitcher wants to know, Josh, VW is coming to an end. Should EU and NA players be concerned, be worried? What do you think?
Should they be worried? You could ask the same thing just about the GSL players. Should the foreigners be worried? No, I don't think they should be worried. I think that when everyone is on the same page, everyone is playing StarCraft 2, I think in a way it's actually going to help the foreigner scene, because that may bring more Koreans to foreign teams, to kind of branch out of the Korean scene. It could be something as simple to help out on travel. It could be something as big of having cross-team partnerships that we've kind of seen with using different
We may have
houses.
lost.
We still there, and that took a long time, though. Brood War wasn't just an instant success. It came out and hit the store shelves, and then 15-year-old girls were screaming at these events for these pro players. No, it took years to happen. And then you had StarCraft, and then Brood War came out, and then after Brood War kind of settled in, and the different patch changes and whatnot, it came to be the game that we all know to be a legend. So StarCraft 2 I don't think will take the same amount of time, because the foundation is already set for Brood War. But when everybody's on the same page, then I feel that the talent that will be pumped into the StarCraft 2 scene in Korea will trickle down to the rest of the world. And everybody's still getting better at the game. They really are. And we're seeing different metagame changes and shifts and whatnot. And things that worked in beta don't work anymore. So I don't think they should be concerned all that much. But we'll see. I could be completely wrong, and every tournament is dominated by Korean players for the next 5 years. I'm not exactly sure, but I think everybody's going to be okay.
All right, well, a follow-up question to that from Stidget as well, and that is, more generally, where do you see esports headed? Do you think there's a future in it? Can pro players make a living from playing video games in tournaments?
Well, pro players are already making a living. There's some websites that give the winnings of different players and how you can have a life, a comfortable life, if you budget your money correctly. Of course, depending on where you live. So players are doing pretty good. The ones that are on salary are doing good. It's a little bit tough to break into the scene when you have a lot of the same talent over and over again placing very high. But then you have people that do very well at an MLG or do very well at the WCS, and that is going to fuel more talent into the scene and more national talent, and so more national people are going to get invested in esports, because if you're playing at a national level in a national competition, I mean, look at football. I don't mean American football. Look at soccer and how nations go crazy for those different events, because they come together. They're in a social scene. They love it. People are going to barcrafts. Barcrafts is continuing to grow, and if you're at a social event, the more social it is, the more popular it will be. So now that esports has hit kind of a social area, and how WCS is creating these national heroes, where does it go from there, right? I mean, does it continue to build or continue to fizzle out? And in my personal opinion, it's going to continue to build. And it's going to continue to build because of the internet. And it's history being repeated, because traditional sports, football, baseball, soccer in America, other kind of sports, grew with television. Television started out, people were still kind of listening to games on the radio, but television really started to push, hey, you should get TV because you could watch these games live. You don't have to go to the stadium. You don't have to travel a couple states away. You can watch it live on your favorite station. And so as they grew together, internet and esports is growing together. And internet is starting to trump television, especially cable television. And more companies and more people that have been involved in poker or have been involved in other kind of competitive scenes are starting to recognize that esports is not just a nerdy trend that's cool to hashtag once every year. This is a serious business that's booming, and there's some serious potential here. And as more of those companies and media outlets, I mean, look at CBS. Look at what CBS Interactive did. They went and partnered with Twitch and NASL and MLG just for kicks. I mean, this is some serious potential that they saw, and they want it to grow. And so seeing that is really it shows a really good infrastructure to have, and it's going to continue to grow. The hardest thing about it is for people like me to make a living, because there's still not much money in it yet. And some people think like, well, if you're a caster or if you're a host, you're set, man. You got a nice house. Like, no, I'm a struggling post-college degree holding but looking for money type of scenario. But there's some good potential, and signing with Esports Management Group is providing some great opportunities for myself and for other people that I've worked with them to show either developers or other kind of sponsors that could be hitting the scene that this is something you definitely want to invest in.
Let's see, because your video's been lagging. I'm trying to see. It looks like it's fixing up right now. At least it seems to be lagging on my end. I don't know if it's my internet or what. Well, it seems better now, so we'll leave it be. But a follow-up to the Esports Management Group. Crane wants to know, what have they done for you, and how important do you see firms like EMG being in esports?
EMG is coming into the scene a little bit early. They've stated that, and some people think that they're there to take money away from people. It's not the case. The only way that EMG gets paid is if they are able to sign with a client for me to be there. Then they'll take it. This is how agencies work, and I've been familiar with agencies since for a long time, because being an actor, this is how the world works. You work with an agent. The agent talks with the people. They book the gig, and they take a percentage of what you get paid from the gig. And EMG to me is a very important milestone in esports, because this shows a company that has been completely proven with poker royalty in the poker scene, and how there's some serious similarities from esports and poker, and how they look at esports and they believe in the long term of it, and they believe in the growth of it, and they want to invest in it. And for a lot of companies, it is a serious investment period to be involved in esports. And for me, their representation has really given me a lot of clout, if you will. I have somebody that advocates for you. I have somebody that represents me, and they're able to talk to others on my behalf, and then they can come to me and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And we can brainstorm some ideas, and they're really a great team to have in my corner. They helped with talks with NASL, and you guys saw the result of that. So Tasteless signed with them for a reason, and Tasteless is on the top tier of talent, him and Nartosis and a couple others, when it comes to casting talent for StarCraft 2. So within esports, there's a lot of great potential and a lot of great growth, and they can bring a lot of cool things into esports. They could bring any sort of eyes that have looked at poker and then are interested about esports, and they could give them a good introductory to what esports is all about. And there's things outside of esports that they can help with, which I'm looking forward to as well, because esports is fantastic. It's great, but it doesn't encompass the entire gaming sphere that exists. There's still a lot more people that we can talk to, that we can branch out to, and that our talents can be used for things outside of esports, that people could Google us and go, whoa, he was involved in doing NASL and Major League Gaming, what's that? And all of a sudden somebody's interested in esports. So there's a lot of great potential, a lot of great growth inside and outside of esports.
I'm going to take these last 3 questions and we'll go to break, and then I'll try and keep the second half short. But, man, I keep saying these are going to go to an hour, and it's so hard to keep it to an hour. But we did say, I did tell you an hour, so prevent it from going too long, but people do want to know, Creamy again, and they'll ask Steve's question, and we'll end with Desarba for the first half. But Creamy wants to know if you see being a host for MLG and ASL, other tournaments like that, can that be a long-term stable career?
Just hosting events as of right now, I can't make a full living on, but using my hosting abilities outside of esport events, but within like the esport scene, like doing commercials or working in some way between events, I definitely think that I could make a living out of it. A modest living, but definitely make a living out of it. And I always have to be open to diversify my portfolio. And what that means is I've casted for tournaments outside of Major League Gaming and NASL. I've casted StarCraft 2, I've casted League of Legends, and to be able to kind of branch out but still stay within like the same career path, but be able to use talents and skills outside of the one direct thing I do at leagues. But if somebody asked me, hey, could you fill in? We've had an emergency. I could say, yeah, I could fill in. I mean, I'm not like an Apollo, and I'm not like a Riveting the Third, but I could hold my own. And that's also important behind the camera as well, to understand production and to be familiar with some things and to know what works on camera and what looks good on camera and how that can help in a live setting as well. So, and a lot of actors understand that because acting is so tough just to find gigs anyways. So it's like, hey, if you know how to do lights and you can act, or you know how to do a sandboard and you can act, kind of helps a little bit. And when you have more tools in your trade that you can use, it'll help me. So as of right now, can't make a full living on it yet, but hopefully here pretty soon, be able to eat more than just ramen.
I don't know. Ramen's not bad, and it's cheap.
Dude, I was hanging out with some of the Castle players after the event, and Stork and Jadong made me some shin noodles. They are so good. They're so good, and so I gotta buy them every time I go to the grocery store.
That's the only kind of ramen you can get. Oh my goodness, so delicious. Oh, they didn't put cheese in it, did they?
No cheese,
okay.
No cheese.
Okay. A lot of Koreans seem to like that, and I've never been able to get my head around that. Sigil also wants to know what your rank on the ladder is and what race you play when you get a chance.
I played Terran, I think one of the only 3 left Terran players in North America, and I was Diamond in the first season, and then I've been Platinum every season since. Just try to break back into Diamond, but I play a lot of different games, and so I don't play just StarCraft 2, but one day maybe we'll get back into Diamond, we'll see. But I love StarCraft 2. It's one of my favorite games of all time. It's still got some room to grow. Obviously, we have 2 more expansions, but the feeling of winning on ladder when you play StarCraft 2 is one of the best feelings ever when it comes to playing games.
I really want to ask you why you like StarCraft 2. We'll save it to the second half, though, because I do want to see if we can get the video issue sorted out.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and we'll take a break. DeServo, I'll ask your question at the beginning of the second half. But let's see if we can sort of, because we're getting a lot of lag in the video. So let's see if we can get that sorted out during the break. We'll come back. We'll ask DeServo, we'll ask your question. We'll ask you about why you love StarCraft 2, why it's so awesome, and then we'll spend just a couple minutes talking about acting and hobbies and your favorite foods and music and books. So guys, we'll be right back. Hey guys, all right, so we're back for the second half. I think video problem has been solved. Give us an update though. It's looking fine on my end. There's the thumbs up.
Hopefully.
Thumbs up is coming through crystal clear for me. So, but guys, do let us know. Desarba, can you rephrase the question about the backstage shenanigans and the scene and who it's bad for? I'm not quite understanding exactly what you're trying to get at. I know you don't want to go into specifics, but if you can maybe clarify it a little bit or reword it. And while you do that, and we'll look at it again afterwards, but while you do that, Josh, you talked about at the end of the first half that you love StarCraft 2, which I guess is apparent because you're hosting, but why do you love it? I mean, what about it, about StarCraft 2, do you find so enjoyable? As opposed to, trying to think of the best way to phrase this, why are you investing your time as a host in StarCraft right now as opposed to Quake or League of Legends or Han or Dota or whatever?
Well, on a personal side, when it comes to the video game itself, I was so thrilled when I first saw the release of StarCraft 2, the trailer back in like 2007, and then when the videos were coming out that were voiced by Dustin Browder showing different units, and checking the website, I don't know, once a week for the next couple of years to find out what was happening. And then a friend of mine who says, hey, I just got into beta, and this was February of 2010, and I was freaking out, man. And he's like, yeah, I can get you in and whatnot. And I was able to get in, and I was playing, and then a couple of my friends were like, well, I want to play. How do I get, like, they wanted to come over and stuff. So the bomb drop of when people were playing beta and how that completely altered my world in a sense. So that, I hope that gives a sense of how much I love StarCraft and how much I love Brood War and how I always had it installed on my computer. Didn't play it as much, you know, a couple of years up to StarCraft 2, but would, you know, hop in every now and again. And when I physically picked up my copy, I had prepared in months in advance. I took 2 weeks off from work. I was an accountant at this time. I was also, I believe I was in school. Or no, I had just finished my associates and was going to go work on my bachelor's. So the summer I had off, so I was working. I took 2 weeks off, and I was watching the event that Day 9 was hosting from Harvey Mudd, I believe. I think he was with JP. Watched that for a little while, and then I just couldn't contain myself. So I went over to the place where I bought it from. It was about 9 o'clock, and they knew I was going to be there because they knew how excited I was. And they had saved some boxes for me that had Jim Raynor on it and stuff, and I was really grateful that they saved those for me and gave me a poster, and I threw that in my car. And I took with me a camping chair, and I put it next to the desk or the counter and just sat there and waited. And then my buddies actually were going to go buy it from another store, but they changed their pre-order to that store so they could hang with me, and then we were there for a couple hours, and we took some pictures. And there's actually me. They folded down Raynor's head, and you could stand behind the Marine with StarCraft 2 with his Gauss rifle, and I'm there with my head like looking all serious. And so it was a good time. And then the moment came, and I was the first one to grab my collector's edition box. And I remember I had my hands on the counter, and I was thinking I might cry right now. And I was holding back tears a little bit. And it wasn't just, you know, this nerd thing of playing a video game. It was, I have waited for this for such a long time, and now it is finally happening. So there was a lot of depth to that moment. And got in the car. See you, dudes! Right now, went back to my home, installed it, and just enjoyed the single player and played the single player a number of times and got all of the achievements except for 2, which was it's raid night and then that Viking game. I was like, I don't want to cruise through it under 8 hours, and the Viking game I just couldn't beat. I was like, man, this is tough, so I stopped. But I played it on like normal and then hard and then brutal, and I just totally engaged, man. I really enjoyed the story, enjoyed the cinematics, and I had been playing beta for multiplayer for a while, and so I started getting multiplayer of StarCraft 2, and I was like just taking out nerds left and right, man, with 5 Rex Reaper and whatnot, and then started to play against better people, and I was like, this is really hard. This is like back in my Brood War days when I had to, like, as a 12, 13-year-old, understand I could make more than 1 barracks, and that I had to in order to make more Marines. So understanding more of the RTS principles and whatnot, and truly winning and being involved and seeing the community of StarCraft 2 and Team Liquid, and understanding more of Team Liquid and how they were moving into StarCraft 2. And the narrative story of 2 players going head-to-head is easy to follow from a spectator's viewpoint. They built the game from the ground up, StarCraft 2, to be an esport. And seeing the dramatic matches happening back and forth and seeing the elation of these players when they win and how intense they have to be and how fast they have to be, and they don't have time to think really. They just react and they go, and their strategy is in the moment. They can't, like, hey, pause the game. Okay, if he's making infestors, then they can't do that. You have to seriously be just going 110 miles an hour playing that. And that storyline of when they win and their struggle against a certain race, or how they use Hellions and all these things, and seeing that unfold in front of your eyes is so dramatic and so cool. Now, I love other games, and you know, the team element of League of Legends or Dota 2, and also the first-person shooter mechanics and Twitch mechanics of other games are fun to watch. But to me, I think the best kind of spectator element of an esport is found in StarCraft 2 at this moment, because you see one guy versus one guy, and they're going to do some crazy stuff to win.
Well, so is there a particular storyline that stands out for you in StarCraft 2?
There are a lot, but particularly the Boxer versus Idra matchup that went to Game 7, and seeing Boxer came back, even though he lost the series, but seeing him fight to come back, we were all on the edge of our seats watching that, man. Some of us on the verge of tears, because Boxer's a legend, and getting to meet him and interview him, and when I told Jessica that I was an actor as well, and she's like, "You're an actor too," and she lit up, and she's very serious about being their team manager. She was very she did a very good job. I was very impressed with how she handled her team live there at the tournaments, and MMA. It's just been such a nice guy to me, and such a cool guy, and seeing his career happen. Okay, so I told you about the matches of Idra versus Boxer coming back, but one of my favorite moments was at BlizzCon of 2011, where they were having the GSL finals, and I was in the hotel, and the GSL staff was there, and they were filming, and they come up to me like, "Hey, Clutch, hey, how you doing?" And in my broken Korean and in their broken English, we were trying to communicate to one another, but there was a translator there. And they filmed me, and they asked me, or MVP and MMA were right there, and they were going to be the ones that were going to go at it. This was the finals. And they asked me who was going to win. And I told them, you know, MVP is really good. He's really favored to win, but I'm going to go with MMA because he's like my brother. And he won! MMA won! And he saw that filmed. And so the next time I saw him, he goes, "You chose me? You chose me?" He's like, "Yeah, man, I chose you." And it was just such a really cool moment. That crowd was so huge at BlizzCon, and it was one of kind of the first events in a while that I wasn't part of the production, so I could just sit back and relax and watch and not have to think of questions or look at the time frame, what we can fit, but just to be a spectator. And I was there with who I think is one of the best writers in esports, Gimble and Arn, a.k.a. MLG Omerta, who's been on Shifting Gears a number of times, but he was there with me, and him and I just enjoyed that moment. And that's going to be one of the moments I'll always remember when it comes to esports.
I love hearing about moments like this, just because, you know, as a spectator who's only had a chance to go to maybe like one or two events, there's so much that just happens behind the scenes, behind the cameras, that happens when you have a chance to really be there, and you're talking to these players, you're interacting with these people. So it's really cool to sort of get a glimpse at some of the experiences that you've had the privilege to be a part of. Desarba and Chandra, I'll ask your questions at the end. Desarba, I'm going to have to read through that first, just so I make sure I get it all, because it's a very... I appreciate the length, but it's going to be 50 minutes to get through it.
I think I understand the essence of the question. Is the arguments or the drama that's happening with the production facility, be it the people or whatever, or the sponsor or whatever, is that going to affect the viewer, or is that going to affect the final product? And it can, but that's up to the producers if it'll affect them or not. And different companies, different leagues have to make the decisions of who's going to represent them, either just in the moment as a private contractor, or who's going to help represent their product with sponsors, and how do they act both at the league, at the event, and outside the event as well. And sometimes you have to take a gamble, you have to take a risk, because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. This person may be a very excellent professional, always a consummate professional, but then they make a lot of mistakes at the event. And so do you hire them again? Do you give them another chance? That's up to the producers. The thing about the internet now compared to what television production was like 30 years ago is there's so much more access to information of what's going on, and so much more direct link to information or to individuals, that pitchforks are easier to grab, and people can rally behind different opinions that happen on Twitter for a day, and that can really be a big impact because people take that as the majority of the community, and that can be true in some sense. Some sense it could just be a vocal minority. So in summation, I would say that you have to do the best at all times and do whatever kind of damage control you need to, but let it go. Let it go and focus on the next production. And if you have a positive attitude and you're doing things in a positive way, then people will be more attracted to that than here's everything that's gone wrong and this is why it went wrong and it's unfair and all these things. A lot of things happen that's unfair. A lot of things happen that's gone wrong, and that's out of your control. But if you let it determine how you act both professionally and outside the professional scene, then the people that attacked you won. And that's not what you want.
Right, but I think what DeSarba's sort of honing in on is the difference between, if we're just looking at tournaments, it may be the difference between an MLG and a Home Story Cup, where Home Story Cup is, they've explicitly said it's about the players, it's about an experience, it's about the game, as opposed to it's about sponsors, it's about money. I mean, not to say that's what MLG is about, but MLG is at a much bigger focus on, trying to promote esports, trying to get big sponsors, get big names. They've done a lot of partnerships. So I think what DeSarba's asking is does he as a viewer, does he as a viewer need to be concerned about these tournaments in general sort of getting too caught up in the idea of StarCraft being a product to be sold to people, as opposed to a passion in which people want to enjoy and consume? Is that if will esports lose its soul if they're always concerned about money? I think that's sort of what he's going for. Okay. Well, the thing about Home Story Cup is you can't compare it to in terms of scale to an event like MLG or NASL or IGN, because it's in a guy's house and he's inviting these players and they're having a good time. But those players represent, with their jerseys, with their player, with their name, their teams and their sponsors. And whatever sort of guidelines or principles they have to act as a player at those large-scale tournaments, if they're still the same player, then those guidelines are going to apply to smaller-scale tournaments. And those are bylaws or dictates or whatever kind of codes of conduct they have that has to be understood by the player and by the team and by the managers. Now, like as a viewer, I view Home Story Cup differently than I view MLG. Home Story Cup is like, I wish I was there chilling with those guys, eating so it looks good and they're having a good time. I wasn't all that interested in the gameplay, honestly. I didn't feel like much was at stake in the game. The narrative was more of a chill time with the players than a really intense StarCraft 2 tournament. Now you watch IGN, IPL or NASL or MLG. That's about the tournament. It's about the storyline of the tournament. Who's going to win? And at Home Story Cup, I didn't get that sense. And I don't think that's what Home Story Cup's about. It's more of, hey, let's throw a tournament together and everybody hang out. I don't want to comment on players' actions or the standards of players, because that's up to the players and the people that pay them money and what they represent. But I know that I always have to act professionally, and that's my choice. And I take every job seriously, no matter the scale. So can I ask you a quick follow-up, and then I'll ask Crane's question, and then we will get to acting at some point, because if I can only get one question, and it will be the question about acting. But to follow up on that, make sure I don't go AFK and lose myself. To follow up on that, you don't feel like there's a natural conflict between being successful monetarily as a tournament, as an tournament organizer, and still capturing the feeling of the fans, still presenting a strong tournament for the fans that everyone's going to enjoy. Well, if it's not an event that everybody enjoyed, then it's not a success. And
Money's important, yes. I want to make a living out of doing this. I love what I do, and I have to spend a lot of time making sure that I am prepared to do it. And I don't want anything to conflict with a schedule that I have to make this possible. Like if I go audition for a show in New York City and I have to be there for 6 weeks or go on tour for a year, I can't do esports anymore. I simply can't. It's not going to work. They're not going to say, oh yeah, you can leave for this weekend and go do something else. We'll just have somebody fill your spot, or we'll just cancel these 3 shows. It's going to bring in $52,000. I can't. That's just something I can't do. But as a film actor, if I can, audition or do this commercial or do this episode or do this movie for a couple weeks or a day or half a day, that fits within my esports schedule and allows it to work. But if the perfect mix of making money and doing something that you love to do, that's what everybody wants. And as you guys can see, I don't want to announce how much I'm getting paid, but the thing about it is I'm not there just for the money, and you guys have seen me perform. I'm there because I love it.
Right.
And if I was able, or I should say when I'm able to make this a full-time thing, how much more I can give of myself, because that is all I'm doing professionally in my life. I just, if you can imagine a tournament that's just got a huge prize pool and none of the players show up and no fans show up, it's like, what happened? What went wrong? That'd be really sad to see. But we're all growing. That's the funny thing about it too. Is like, there's no like esports. Oh, there's no like esports head figure that we've seen other head figures in media, movies, television, or radio, that we can follow their steps to success. We're all following steps in a way of how to present media in a system that's old and archaic when it comes to television. We're still learning how the internet should work, the distribution system should work, Twitch TV is continuing to grow. What we like as this generation compared to what our parents' generation enjoyed, and how that's shifting over to the internet. So there's a big learning process for a lot of people. And certain decisions are made that work and certain decisions are made that don't work. But we have to stick to the ones that work, both monetarily and for the fans and the players.
Well, last question from Craney, I think that sort of ties into what you're talking about, and also what DeSarba was trying to ask is, or was asking, that I sort of had trouble articulating, is do you see the heavy dependence right now on sponsors' money as a bad thing? And if you do, how do you, or either way, regardless of whether you do or you don't, how do you see us monetizing in the long run, ideally?
The biggest issue that comes up with a lot of sponsor money in the scene is conflicting sponsors, and that can prove a challenge based on how vocal the sponsors are. Competing energy drinks, competing PC peripherals. So that can be a little bit tricky, but having a sponsor is a great thing, because you have a product that believes in you as a player and feels that there's a mutual benefit of them supporting you and you being the face of their product, an advertiser for their product. I don't know what other kind of system will work in the esports scene besides either sponsorships or pay-per-views. Pay-per-view is a little bit tricky, because if you have a wall up for the entire event, does it limit the growth of esports? Some people can argue yes, and some people can argue, well, it depends how big scale the event is. I feel that the best mode that is working right now is the standard mode in terms of leagues or production, where you can watch the production in standard definition and then you can upgrade to high definition for a small fee. I think that's going to be the best way to run it right now. But there's other people that are starting to look into esports from different media outlets and different media understandings that maybe could present something better. But I'm grateful that it's still growing, and we'll see what happens in the future. I mean, YouTube is starting to get more into live streaming, and there's some other companies out there that may be getting into it. But I want to address this as well, that going to television is not like the end-all be-all of esports. Going to television just kind of opens up some more eyes to see esports, but esports is internet, and the internet's the future, so why go back in time?
Sorry, it's just interesting you say that because the thing that I'm doing, working towards professionally, is working on radio. So that's sort of, it's interesting because in a way that really hits home. It's like why I've been thinking about that myself and having a separate discussion with people about radio versus podcast versus, the idea of the archaic medium. And I've been shooting for radio because it's what I've grown up with, but at the same time, with the internet being, the way we're going, it's just interesting that sort of...
Well, but the thing about radio is, if we had an esports radio station, I think Major League Gaming tweeted about doing a radio broadcast of the event, and that'd be great. Even if it's just internet radio, still having an audio-only feed when you can't watch video is definitely viable in this tech culture. We do it when we drive our cars, we do it when we're at work, so there's still a scene for radio in a sense. Now, local broadcasting, the advantages of that is you have local events and you have, local sponsorships and whatnot, but internet broadcasting could be a little bit more difficult getting sponsors at first because you're broadcasting to the entire world, but when you show some numbers and more peripherals will get in. I've thought about that too, man, because I've thought about working at local television and whatnot, and then I look at the local TV news and I go, this is terrible. Like they're not connected to whatever they're talking about, and they keep fishing for stories and whatnot. So, but I still think radio is a viable form of entertainment.
Well, that is good to hear. My heart is calm. Thank you,
Yeah.
Thank you, Josh. All right. I promised it wouldn't go long, and we've been asking a bunch of actually wonderful user questions. Guys, if you have any more, put them in. We'll ask the last couple more at the end. Oh, there's so many acting questions I want to ask. I'm just going to ask you like one or two. We'll keep it simple, but
okay.
I really do want to know, where did acting come from? Where did that idea that you wanted to be an actor, where did that start?
I was 5 years old, and we had an incredible music teacher named Richard Reynolds when I was in elementary school, Lake Grove Elementary. This was outside the Seattle area where I'm originally from. And they had auditions for a play called It's a Jungle Out There, which is just a really kiddie musical. And I had auditioned, and I played the role of the lion, which is one of the lead roles. And I sang a solo and whatnot, and just had fun with it. And we're all dressed up in costumes. And, of course, parents, when they have kids that age, like whatever the kid does is going to be cute, right? And so I really enjoyed it. I just had a lot of fun doing it. It felt natural to me to perform. And this music teacher just really helped me develop a passion for performing, a passion for music, and for singing. And I went to his class and was part of the choir from 5 years old to when I left elementary school. And we did a number of different productions. We did Aladdin, like Disney's Aladdin. I got to play Aladdin one time, and that was a blast. I really enjoyed that. And the girl that played Jasmine was cute. So that was like the turning point. I was also kind of like starting to like girls. Girls don't have cooties anymore. They're actually cute and whatnot, and that was fun. And I always wanted that to be in my life. I always loved to perform, to make people laugh, to make people think, and to entertain people. And that grew more and more through school and doing a lot more productions. And then it came down to, well, am I going to do this? Am I going to go to college for this? What are my options? And I actually received a full-ride scholarship to join the Air Force, and that was with computer engineering and to study to be a pilot. And I was like, yes, sweet, pilot. I would love to do this. Didn't work out, unfortunately, but fortunately for me. And the scholarship was cut because of the war with Iraq and budgeting issues, but they wanted to keep me, and the major of the program actually was willing to pay for half of my tuition out of his own pocket. Wow. And I was like really honored by that, but I felt, computer engineering is not my thing. I have a lot of respect for people that work in that field, but it didn't click with me. And so I went home we lived in Kansas at the time, and then moved from Kansas to Virginia literally the next day after I came home, and was on the East Coast for a while, worked construction and didn't really do any acting. And then I served a 2-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints out in L.A. and learned Spanish and lived in places like in Compton and Watts. And I always found I loved entertaining people still. I would break dance and beatbox, and they would like freak out seeing this guy in like the ghetto be able to do this and stuff. And And it dawned on me, man, that a lot of times in our lives we'll see a couple different paths, maybe two paths, and we'll decide to go on one path, and it turns into a dead end. But at least that way we know for sure that the other path is the right one to go. And to me, I felt that's what happened in my life. Is I went the military route, and it didn't work out for me, but it didn't work out for me for a reason, and I knew that acting and performing was going to be my thing. And so I went to school at Old Dominion University after I graduated from Tidewater Community College with an associate's. I was working and going to school full-time, which was nuts, and starting to get more involved in esports at the time as well. And ODU is a great school out north of Norfolk, Virginia. They're known for their basketball team. They have a great acting program. Learned a lot of great things from them, and continued to study and continued to grow in esports as well, and did some productions. And to capstone my college career of acting, I did the Death of a Salesman at the Virginia Stage Company, which is one of the regionally known theaters that they bring down professional New York actors for. And to work with those actors, and they would tell me legitimately, like, you got a lot of talent, kid, stick with this, meant a lot to me. And so that reaffirming notion of I kind of chose the right path for myself has helped in times of is this the right thing? Should I be doing this? And confidently I can say yes. So that's where acting came from. That's where I am right now. I've done a couple TV shows, a commercial, and a lot of stage work. And I love to host, man. So that looks good on the resume as well.
Is there a particular medium that you favor?
Of all of them, each one has its strengths and difficulties. Stage, you are there live with the people, and you get the reaction, you get the laughs, you get the crying at the end. You go on a journey with those people. You're telling them the story live. Camera is it's maybe not like more internal per se, but that's kind of like the right verbiage of how I describe it. It's more a little bit more inward. You're interacting with another person in front of you. You can do a lot of things on the camera. You can have multiple takes, and there's some advantages there. But you don't have a live audience kind of feeding off you, and you're not feeding that energy off them. And hosting is like the combination of the two, and it's almost like improv, but not comedic. Like I have to be on the spot all the time backstage, knowing what's going on, who's playing. If they want me to do a post-game interview, to make sure I watch the matches to get good questions. If they want a pre-game interview for the next match that's coming up, to think of creative ways we can fill time, to think of people we can interview, to think of questions for those interviews that are topical but also go in depth. And so it's a great mind game I play when I'm watching these different matches, and then the pressure of, okay, Kespa's today, and I go and I make sure I say all the Kespa names right and all the team names right, and make sure I know their nicknames, like Flash the Ultimate Weapon or Jaedong the Tyrant, and to practice that. And JP even took a picture of me of myself practicing my voice inflection and just making sure I articulate the names right. And it's such a thrill because I both have the reaction from the crowd with an amazing amount of energy, and I can direct that energy and that charisma into the camera as well. And so it's so exhilarating, man. But I like them all. I love them all.
Two last questions, and I'll just do a quick final four to wrap up. First one being, is there a particular type of character, or a particular story that if you were able to choose from any acting job that you would just love to inhabit that space?
As far as to perform that role?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Phantom from Phantom of the Opera, I think, would be a lot of fun. And acting-wise, one of my favorite actors, contemporary actors, is Ryan Gosling. And I think playing the character in Crazy Stupid Love would have been a lot of fun to play. Because you get to slap around, what's the actor's name? Steve Carell. You get to slap him around, and you get to have make-out times with Emma Stone. I mean, it just sounds like a lot of fun. So that would have been a really fun role to play, because if you guys haven't seen the movie, he plays a very chauvinistic, very ladies' man, but in a very well-performed way. But he changes because he finds the right girl, and it's such a cool change to see in guys. when they understand of this girl is something special, and I should hold on to her. And if I have to make certain changes in my life for the better, then I'll do it. So it's a great movie. You guys should check it out.
Well, there you go. I will add it to my list of things to watch tonight because I haven't seen it yet. But now I want to. You've convinced me.
Emma Stone, man. I'll invite you to the wedding if she ever breaks up with Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield.
I appreciate it. Well, actually, speaking of shout-outs, are you working on any productions now that like people in the area might? Because I'm quite honestly, like, I'm in Virginia, so if I ever have a chance to come see like a live production of you, I'd love to have a chance to see you acting, not just hosting.
Oh, well, thank you. I did a couple TV shows within the last couple of months that'll be on Netflix probably next season. There's a couple of me on Netflix. They're listed on my IMDb page.
Okay.
You can look up Joshua Gray. These are really small budget shows, guys, and there's not much acting to them. It's more of like drama reenactments. And so one character I played is like, okay, you're high on coke and you're robbing the store. And that's it. And so I have to improv it all. So that's kind of fun. So as in terms of those kind of shows, like, don't expect anything big, but they've been fun to be a part of, and seeing my growth of being really excited to have like this lead character role in one of these like docudramas. And the last one I did, I was totally like nonchalant and not like a whatever attitude, but I didn't need to do much. But those kind of actors, when they don't need to do much, are like the best kind of camera actors, and the process of me learning that has been a lot of fun. And in terms of stage work, nothing right now, my friend, because since I just finished school, I'm in that really weird phase of I'm looking to move and seeing what kind of job opportunities there are for me to move either to New York or California, and we'll go from there. But for acting, it pretty much has to be New York or California. And for esports, there's a lot of good things happening in both cities. Particularly, California's got some good stuff. So we'll see. And MLG's up in New York, but I like California.
Fair enough. I can't argue with that.
We'll see what happens, man. But there's some good things coming down the pipeline. And like I said, EMG is they're a great team to have in my corner, and we've been working on some stuff. And when it's officially released, PR-wise, you guys will know.
Cool. Well, can I ask you? I don't know if you can say this, but I am curious. You and EMG have referenced several times that work outside of just esports. You talked a little about the gaming community, but would they ever do anything acting-wise for you, or is that a separate agent that you have for acting?
Acting-wise, I feel that my agents have some context they can make, and if they feel that they can't fully represent me acting-wise, and they will refer me to somebody they trust that can, and they can work as a team where EMG would be my agent for esports or technological or gaming-related stuff, and then I could have a separate agent that's more of Hollywood type things. But those are conversations we can have down the line. I have a local agent right now that helps with TV bookings, and I auditioned for a J.J. Abrams show recently, but it's just mostly local stuff that's shot in this area, and so when I move wherever I move to, EMG will always represent me in terms of the gaming sphere, and we'll have discussions of if I need further representation outside of them.
Right. Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, we've gone on much longer than I said we would, but I'm just having a blast. But we should wrap up. We'll do the final four, which are music, movies, books, and food. We'll start with music. Give me some favorite bands, some favorite songs, what you're listening to now.
Music, honestly, my favorite is movies and video game soundtracks. And composers would have to be Howard Shore, James Newton Howard, John Williams. Bands, stuff like that. I enjoy the Killers. I think their first album, Hot Fuss, was the best one. I've enjoyed some of their music. Beck, one of his songs I really love. Oh my gosh, I forgot the title, but just talking about he broke up with his girlfriend is the background of the song. On Lost, it's called Lost. Great song. It's a depressing song, but that was one of the songs I think in high school that I first heard it and went, whoa! I just stopped in my tracks and listened to the whole song. Other bands. Chromeo, I've been listening to their music recently. Really like their stuff. Hall & Oates, classic 80s. Those guys are really good. So there's just a couple samples out there. But I love Spotify, and I have a lot of different types of music on there. Dubstep's cool. I take it in doses, though. I mean, a lot of people are moving over into dubstep, and it's fun music, but just to all the time, it's like I need some classical to balance this out, man. It sounds like Transformers are mating sometimes in that.
Thank you for the visual.
Yeah, sorry about that. Movies. The original Star Wars trilogy,
of course,
and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I think, are some of, if not the biggest cinematic achievements of all time. The first Matrix is very cool. I really loved Zombieland when it came out. I really, really loved Tron Legacy. I thought that was a very well done movie. And I love the visuals, and I love the soundtrack. Daft Punk, I love their music. Other films, thinking of like on acting terms or acting quality, growing up with the comedy of Jim Carrey with Ace Ventura and Liar Liar, I just think, you may call it overacting, but he has so much energy in his performance. It's so much fun to watch. And watching the greats, Al Pacino and others in their careers, is just, they're going to stand the test of time, that kind of film acting.
Can I ask you, I hate to do this, but can I ask you, with films, as an actor, do you ever get caught up in a film? Do you ever get caught up sort of watching nuances of an actor or looking for nuances in a film? Or do you just still find
Jeff Goldblum, man. Jeff Goldblum sometimes has that life finds a way kind of thing. His delivery is interesting in his character. He's not as prevalent anymore. He's doing television work, but I enjoyed the films he was in as a kid, and he was just one of those actors that there's Jeff Goldblum. I mean, I don't remember any of his characters. I just remember it was Jeff Goldblum. Actors' eyes tell a lot. Ryan Gosling's eyes in Driver tells just a lot about him, man. And it's not very much. You may think dialogue terms, but the windows to the soul, those eyes. And Emma Stone in Easy A, how she acted with her parents and the conversations she had with their parents, I felt was so true in terms of a family and comedy compared to so many things that have been written in films. And Emma Stone has those comedic nuances about her that I've noticed, especially watching Spider-Man, that I love. I mean, that's why I fall in love with her. Her personality is so awesome. I'm sure there's others, man, but I just can't articulate them at this time.
That's fine. No, I mean, it's. I was just sort of curious, and you've already given me some insight into things that stand out for you, things to look for, things that. Yeah. And it's interesting to listen to them. Robert
Downey Jr. I feel is such a great actor in terms of different character. When I watch him in Sherlock Holmes, it feels like I'm watching Sherlock Holmes. When I watch him as Tony Stark, I feel like I'm watching Tony Stark. And then to see him in a role, to see him a role outside of those things, I'm like, oh, this is Robert Downey Jr. playing this. But he really gets into Tony Stark, and he really gets into the Sherlock Holmes role. The other two questions was favorite food, and what was the other one?
Books, literature.
Books. Okay, food. Seafood is my favorite, and next would be like pepperoni pizza. But I'm 26, so like greasy pizza isn't as appetizing to me anymore as it was when I was a kid. And books. Well, I recently read every book in the Diablo universe. I feel that the StarCraft II book, Queen of Blades, is really good. I feel it's a really good book. Lord of the Rings books I've read. Oh gosh, I'm like looking at my bookcase of all the books that I've read. Rainbow Six, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six was a cool book. Michael Crichton's Timeline was a fun book. I never watched the movie because I saw the cast and went, no. And I haven't been an avid reader lately, and I'm tempted not to read any of the Game of Thrones or books because I'm so tied to the show. But people are like, no, you gotta read them, so we'll see. I also need to read Ender's Game because I haven't read that one yet. So those are on my list that I need to do, but I'll get to them.
Gimble wants to know if you've read StarCraft Ghost Nova.
Yes, I've read all the StarCraft books that have been published except the latest manga, the StarCraft, the Ghost Academy. So I did. I read Nova. I like it. I wish there was a little bit more of a bridging gap between her at that kind of fragile state of where she was in that novel to the attractive badass girl she is right now. And I think the StarCraft Ghost mangas are trying to teach that, but I feel there's too many characters in the mangas to really appreciate her growth, just from a story standpoint. But I liked her appearance in StarCraft too. I went, oh, there she is. So we'll see how she grows in Heart of the Swarm. And Sarah Kerrigan. Oh my gosh, man. I talked to Dustin Browder back behind the scenes, and I won't reveal much, and he didn't reveal much to me. But there's a story there, man. I mean, she got betrayed, and then she got infested, and now she's lost all her power, and people are trying to kill her. That's an interesting scenario to be in.
Yeah, just a little.
Yeah.
All right. I got to follow up on food, though. Seafood. What's your favorite seafood dish?
Oh, crab. I really love crab and shrimp and sushi. I'll have sushi anytime. But for my birthday, when I turned 25, I had my parents prepare this seafood dinner for me, and they came to my apartment, and myself and my roommates and some other people just had this feast of seafood, and it was so good. It was so good. So just really enjoy that kind of food, man. I can't have it all the time, and as long as it's prepared right, it's going to taste awesome. But if it's not, then you'll get the gout and be sick for a while, so that's not good.
Yep.
I love seafood.
Right.
Salmon. Seattle area, salmon. Love salmon.
Salmon. All right. Last question from chat, and then we'll do quick shout-outs, and we'll end it. But Crane wants to know if you think for MLG to grow, if they need to expand to Europe. I know there's been talk about it earlier, but do you think it's a necessity to go to Europe? Or should that be DreamHack and DreamHack territory?
DreamHack does a fantastic job in Europe. And the partnership they had with the standing of Thorzane winning and going to Spring Arena number 2, I believe, was really cool. And I feel that having that kind of interleague integration, working with each other to benefit the players, is a great thing to happen. You know, Major League Gaming is known for being a premier North American event. I mean, they have some great events. I don't see the necessity of moving into Europe. Because DreamHack already does a good job. So their presence there. The biggest thing in my mind, though, that's difficult for a lot of players is travel. And that's the amount of money it costs for travel for players can be astounding. Even just for staff or for editorial sites to send people can be a lot of money over the year. So a more centralized location, a more centralized hub for esports. Do I see that in the future? Possibly, but I think the 3 major hubs we have right now is just like the continent of North America, and then the continent of Europe, and the continent of, well, the country of Korea, South Korea. But maybe in the future, the West Coast will be the major esports hub for America, and then Sweden will be the major esports hub for Europe. And then the major esports hub, which is the major esports hub for the world right now, is in Seoul. So we'll see how that develops, but anything that cuts on travel will be beneficial to the scene in the future.
Fair point. All right, shout-outs that you'd like to do, letting people know where they can follow you. Give us a spiel.
People can follow me on Twitter at Clutch08. They can watch me stream at different times during the week, since my schedule is a little bit free right now as I currently look for a job or more gigs to host or more TV shows to do. They can watch me at twitch.tv/Clutch08. Shifting Gears is on at Tuesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern at twitch.tv/Clutch08. The episode tonight will feature Bart from High Res Studios. It's going to be really great, guys. So really check it out to get to know High Res more, to get to know Bart more, and to get a good precursor of what's going to happen Tribes Ascend-wise at the NASL Season 3 Finals. I want to give a big shout out to everyone. The list is so huge I won't name everybody that has helped me foster my growth, that has invested their time, their talents, or just some of their advice in me to help me grow and to be better not just in the professional scene, but as a person. Want to thank my agent, Esports Management Group. They do a great job, and I'm so glad to be with them, especially with Tumba, who's like a brother to me, who's doing great things. And to everyone at Major League Gaming, they make a great product, and to everyone at NASL, they make a great product, and I look forward to hosting for NASL. It's going to be a great time. And here's a reveal: I'll be hosting at the Summer Arena as well for MLG later this month, so that'll be a lot of fun. And Dark Knight Rises comes out at midnight, which I will be able to see, and forgive me if I keep saying Batman references when I'm interviewing players, but it'll be a great film. That's the Christopher Nolan films are one of my top films as well. So that's me, guys. I appreciate everyone's support, and really check out the NASL Season 3 Finals. It's going to be a great time. It starts this weekend.
Wonderful. I'm sure we'll all do that, and I think a lot of us are going to be tuned into your show in just a couple hours. I hope we haven't cut too much into your prep time. But Josh, thank you
no,
so much for taking the time to talk with us. I said an hour, it's been almost 2, and if I could, I would keep you longer. Still got more questions, but it's been really nice to have a chance to sit down and there's just we often get to know the personality, but I feel like it's very rare that we know the person, and I feel like you're one of those people who is surprisingly consistent in the personality and the person. So it's really been a great pleasure to have a chance to sit down and sort of barrage you with questions and really get to know you. So thank you. But we will let you go. Do your thing. We'll tune in a couple hours and watch and enjoy. I hope I'm still have energy for that, but need be it'll be an energy drink and I'll keep going. Guys, thank you for tuning in. Still deciding on our guest for next week. We used to plan 4 weeks in advance, and then we found out that when we plan 4 weeks in advance, everyone forgets, even if we remind them the week before. So we're being a little more going week by week now. But we'll tweet you, we'll put on the Facebook, all that good stuff as soon as we know our next guest. But thank you for tuning in for this week, and we'll catch you guys next week.